Welcome to the Sports Umbrella, where we cover all aspects of sports. Soak in all the knowledge from our guests who range from pro athletes playing up a storm to industry experts making it rain. My name's Kelly Okun, and I'm a former pro golfer and founder and CEO of Fairway to Green, an equitable sports media company. Joining us this episode, presented by GalwayPlus, are Ed Carpenter and Ryan Staub from the IndyCar world. Ed is currently the only driver and owner in the field. He has 3 wins and 4 poles and is looking to win his first Indy 500 this week. He'll be driving the number 33 Chevrolet under Ed Carpenter Racing. Ryan is the principal of Epic Motorsports Insurance and has more than 20 years in the industry as a victorious high-level amateur driver and risk management specialist. Ryan, Ed, thank you both so much for joining us today. Ed, to better help our audience understand, can you please describe the IndyCar series and how it differs from NASCAR and Formula One?
Well, it's easier to describe the differences between IndyCar and NASCAR just because they're more visibly obvious. IndyCar is a North American-based open-wheel racing series. So we're the top open-wheel racing series in North America, where NASCAR is the top stock car closed fender racing series in North America. It's a little harder to describe the differences in IndyCar and F1. At the simplistic form, the biggest difference is money. Their budgets are a lot larger, mainly because the rule sets they operate under are a lot different than ours. We're not a spec series, but all the teams use more common suppliers. We all use the same chassis. There's 2 engine manufacturers, but the physics and looks and the way the teams operate are much more similar between IndyCar and F1. We're a domestic series. They're an international series is probably the biggest difference.
Oh, that's really helpful. Thank you. And what inspired you to go into the IndyCar side? And you've had such an incredible career there. How did you get your start?
I started young like we all do. So I started racing when I was 8 years old in quarter midgets. Indianapolis has always been home. So I had a passion for the Indy 500, which is really what drove me to IndyCar versus any other options I had, which probably would have, been more the NASCAR direction. I was never focused on international F1 type of racing, but the Indy 500 is what directed me to IndyCar.
Very cool. And Ryan, you have a background in racing as well. Can you expand on that and how you got into it as well?
Yeah, so I wish I got to start as early as Ed did. Did not find my way to motorsports until I was in my early 20s. And yeah, a very different path and a much lower level path than Ed had. But yeah, really started with what are referred to as HPDE or track day events, non-competitive events where people take their performance cars and learn to explore the limits in a non-competitive setting. So did that for a handful of years and then have progressed up the ranks in the amateur racing world. Using a baseball analogy, if Ed's participating in Major League Baseball, I've been more in the AA ranks for what I've done. But the fortunate part is I found a way to, merge my passion for motorsports with professional expertise in insurance, which makes it fun and exciting.
Yeah, and I think we'll touch on that insurance in a little bit, but I'm curious if your maxing out the performance led you to realizing how risky it could be, and that led you to the insurance side. And Ed, you now own a team as well as you're continuing to drive. How are you managing that? What are some of the challenges you're facing trying to be the driver in both seats?
I've been in this role since 2012. That's when we started. ECR was back in 2012. At the time, it was probably a lot harder than it is today, because I was still competing full time in the full 17 to 18 event calendar. Starting in 2015, my driving schedule started reducing. I was just competing oval events. And as we sit here today, I just raced the Indy 500 now. So I only have to wear 2 hats, for one event rather than all of them. So it's gotten easier over time. But, early on, it really was only possible just because I had a great group of people and team around me that took the burden of a lot of the day-to-day management away from me. And I was more focused just as a driver in those early years. And as time has gone on, I've transitioned, less driver Ed and more, owner and management Ed, but still love getting behind the wheel.
Yeah, and I feel like we see a lot of athletes turn into entrepreneurs and take on more leadership in their industries. What inspired you to start making that jump and transitioning to the more corporate side of what you're doing?
All I've ever wanted to do is be involved in motorsports and the IndyCar series and the Indy 500. I had always thought and hoped that I would be able to get into ownership at some point way back when it started, I anticipated it would be after I was done driving. The opportunity presented itself. I was really fortunate to have a group of people around me that wanted to help me start this team. So I wouldn't say I was seeking it out. It was more a case of being at the right place at the right time and circumstances, and didn't want to not take the jump into ownership at the time in 2012, just because I wasn't sure, had I not done it, that the opportunity would have presented itself again. So it was really just a matter of circumstance, but I'm happy that I did it.
Yeah, I'm sure your team is too. Just thinking about the mental pressures that you can feel as an owner, I'm sure you've learned how to handle that by being a driver. Can you just take us into the car for a moment and tell us what it's like racing and what sort of mental dialogue you're having with yourself?
Yeah, I mean, there's not a ton of mental dialogue, driving. There's an element of it that's very intellectual, like playing chess at high speeds. And then there's another part of it that's very instinctual and, based upon skill that you've, to a certain extent, were born with, and to another extent that you've honed over practice and experience. But I do think that the mind frame that it takes to be able to compete and operate at a high level in a high stress environment with a lot going on around you, some of which you can control, some of which you can't, was really good preparation for the ownership side, just because the stress part, you're well adapted at. You just got to learn a different skill set of team building and operating. But, I enjoy both.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Quick question, Ed. I'm just curious if you can share a little bit, and I'd be interested in your perspective. When you are behind the wheel, you're so used to having to plan, prepare, strategize, do all the things that you do as a team owner. Are you able to effectively turn that off when you're behind the wheel in a competition setting, or do you find your mind running to, some of the strategy and other aspects?
Yes and no. I mean, from a strategy standpoint, the driver is always, part of that feedback loop, and, ultimate decisions are getting made by the team on the timing stand, but it's kind of a two-way street on basing some of those decisions on feedback from the driver. So that part, I don't feel like changed a whole lot, but it is different, when I'm in the car versus my mindset when I'm out of the car working with both of our other drivers. It's a little more self-centered, selfish mindset when you're in the car. But there are times, even for drivers that are on a team where they don't have an ownership stake, where, there's still a team element, and sometimes you're doing things for the greater good of the team, even when you're not connected to ownership. So, the one thing people always ask me, I guess, is more of a basic type of thing. Like, are you worried about when a car crashes? Are you worried about finances or this, that, or the other? And that part's an easy no for me, just because comes with the territory. You're going to crash cars. Things are going to happen, whether it's your fault or someone else's. So, kind of like we were talking before, I think there's more good and more compliments of one another that helps you appreciate, whatever role that I'm competing in on any given day. Just a little, probably have more perspective than other drivers I'm competing against.
Yeah. And Ryan, you said you were excited to stay in motorsports. What brought you to Epic Insurance, and how were you able to transition from driver to the corporate side as well?
Yeah, so I've focused on motorsports insurance for about 20 years. Ultimately made the move to Epic about 2.5 years ago, and it was just an exciting opportunity to come to an organization where sports and entertainment, in particular, are a very big strength and vertical within Epic, and they were actually needing someone to lead the motorsports side. So lined up in a lot of ways positively. I got to share, additionally, that there's upper levels of executives that are very passionate about motorsports. So with my specialty and expertise, it was incredibly exciting to be able to join a firm that shared that same passion.
Have you seen some of your driving skills transfer to the boardroom as well?
Yeah, definitely. Different ways, because I'm participating at a much lower level than Ed. But I mean, at the end of the day, success in racing isn't that different than success in business. It's really being detail oriented, focusing on performance. Performance on track is speed and lap times. Success in the business world is ultimately the product that we're able to deliver to our clients. So that's better insurance protection, lower costs, things of that nature. So plenty of similarities, but yeah, it's focusing on those core details, being very diligent in that, and ultimately putting all that effort in for the best possible outcome.
Yeah, sounds like a great fit. And we've alluded to car crashes already, but obviously racing has a space in its industry for insurance. How has Ed Carpenter Racing and Epic joined forces in that space?
Epic's a new partner for ECR, so hasn't transitioned fully onto the racetrack. Insurance and race cars are an interesting mix, and with the level of risk and whatnot, the relationship really lies at a corporate level at the moment with our part of our ownership group, and a big portfolio of their brands is really where we started, and it'll be exciting to see where it grows from there as we, haven't tapped into all the avenues that we could pursue. But that's one of the great things about the motorsports industry and IndyCar series as a whole is, it's a platform to do a lot of business, whether it's within our own team or connected businesses, competitors in some cases. It's a great avenue to meet a lot of people and get a lot of business done. I relate it to how people get business done on a golf course at times. It's just a little louder, a little more going on, but still the same opportunity, and probably can meet more people in the same amount of time.
Yeah, we have insurance too in golf, but that's only if you get a hole in one for the most part. I'm sure
Yeah,
there's liability for getting hit in the head too, but for the most part, I think the product is if you get a hole in one, we have some insurance
exactly.
to help you out. What sort of role does insurance play in racing beyond the obvious of crashes and things like that?
I mean, our race cars actually aren't insured on track. It's more basic just from in the building and transport to the events. There was a period of time back in the late 90s, early 2000s where people were having insurance policies for crash damage and things like that, but the premiums, it didn't really match up from a cash flow standpoint. So, our insurance needs are really not that much different to any other business or trade. Probably where it's a little different is just the amount of assets we have rolling down the road on a weekly basis. Probably creates some different needs and general liability, from the spectator standpoint, and overall risk and umbrella policies covering a wide range of things. But in general, it's very similar to any other business, just that, we're in competition.
Yeah, that's so cool to see how there are just so many entry points into working into the industry. If you love the sport, there's always going to be an opportunity, whether it's on the corporate side and the actual team side. It's fun to see. And Ed, you mentioned that there were a few portfolio companies. I don't know, Ryan, if how are those portfolio companies working with ECR? Are they on the cars? Are they sponsors? Or how do you plan on seeing that work out?
Yeah, I can think of part of that, and then I think Ed would be able to better speak to the relationship with Ted and Heartland Food Products Group. But yeah, ultimately the relationship from our perspective came as a result of, introduction to ECR, which led to conversations with Ed's partner in the business, Ted Gelov, who owns Heartland Food Products Group. So our company within Epic, as we became engaged, saw opportunities to find ways to consult and really optimize on Heartland Food Products Group's insurance program, which covers everything from Splenda, their kind of core historical product they've offered, but then as well the Java House and Slim Fast brands that they've brought up in recent years. And it was a situation where we saw an incredible opportunity to enhance insurance coverage and provide very considerable savings, like north of 20%. So that led to a great beginning to a business relationship, which in turn has evolved to this partnership of Epic supporting ECR in the ways that we do now.
That's great. And Ed, I don't know if you wanted to add on to that too. I know Ryan said you might want to, but
Yeah,
the
I mean,
floor
I
is
think I
yours if you
think
want to.
Brian covered it fairly well, and in some ways, he probably has more intimate knowledge of the whole relationship than I do. As he mentioned, Ted Gelov, he's the owner of Heartland Food Products Group, which owns Splenda, Java House, Slim Fast, and many other brands. Within those entities, their manufacturing facility is just a half mile from our race shop. So I have some integration into that, but really just as it's connected to the race team, we display all those brands on our race cars as sponsors. But my day to day is really operating, outside of driving, operating the team and the involvement here. I see opportunities for growth not only within Heartland, also expanding upon the Epic relationship within the race team, And then at the same time, I know one of Epic's competitors and Gallagher is involved in the sport. So they're doing business here. So it allows us to create some competition within the paddock just to try to get more opportunities, even if it's not directly part of our ECR family, but just to leverage the relationship, to make it stronger. And, everything we do at some level is tied to sponsorship. As Ryan knows, even at lower levels of racing, it's an expensive venture. So we're always trying to show a return to partners, whether that's through raw TV numbers and viewership or more easily to measure things of developing and growing business and creating new relationships. A lot of what you see is the root of a lot of the sponsorships within all of racing.
Do drivers have a say in the sponsorships, or is that held more at the team ownership level? And obviously you're in both, but
Yeah, I mean, it goes both ways. There's drivers that have relationships with different brands and partners that may move with them from team to team. Drivers get to know and interact with all the partners. So for the most part, it's team controlled and team driven. But in cases, there's drivers that have deep relationships that in some cases hold sponsorship contracts or facilitate them for wherever they're driving.
Yeah, and Ed, you said that you handle the day-to-day, the racing side. On the driving side, do you recruit the drivers? Do you mentor them? What is your hand in building the team at the base level?
I mean, there's not really an area that I don't touch for sure. The driver side, driver development, coaching to a certain extent, planning. We're always looking ahead into the future. We've got a connection to two different teams that are in series below IndyCar where we're working with them. And I've got one driver that's got another year on his contract. We're renegotiating with one right now, but you're always trying to find the next great driver to backfill positions. And it's the same way throughout the team, whether it's engineers, developing people from within or attracting new talent, retaining talent. So between drivers and engineers, that's where I spend most of my time.
And what do you look for in drivers? You said that you had an instinct behind the wheel. Is that easy to find, or do you focus on more tangible items until you can see them in action?
I mean, there's certainly plenty of metrics to look at just from a raw speed and performance. And, but that's one of the unique things about our sport. I mentioned the connection to two other teams. So Indy Next is our minor league series that travels to most of our events. And then there's three other series below that kind of between those three series, they're also at most of our events. So you'll see 14-year-olds competing in those series. So you start watching drivers at a pretty young age. So it's obvious who's successful, but it's not always super clear. There's teams that are stronger than other teams. And, one driver may not get as good of a results, but that he's outperforming his equipment. So there's some things that aren't as obvious, but we see them enough. You really get a good idea of who is well-rounded enough and ultimately quick enough to compete at the IndyCar level.
Yeah, I love to hear that. GalwayPlus is the proud sponsor of the Sports Umbrella. GalwayPlus Sports and Entertainment is the first of its kind platform in the wealth and risk management sectors designed to cater to the diverse needs of affluent individuals, teams, leagues, and organizations operating within the sports and entertainment industries. Learn more at GalwayPlus.com. And this is for both of you, but where do you see racing going in the next 5 to 10 years? Ryan, we can start with you because I'm sure you both have very different perspectives from your different companies.
In general, I am incredibly excited of the path and interest that I see developing internationally to a certain extent, but especially in the US. It seemed like for years that numbers had been declining with a number of series out there, but whether it's IndyCar or even IMSA is seeing big boosts in their numbers in the States. And I think it's exciting. I don't know exactly what to point to. One of the theories that I've heard that I think has some merit behind it says vehicles are moving toward more electric vehicles and autonomous vehicles. I think to a certain extent that the average individual out there is it's either seeing vehicles as an appliance and then really appreciating, the art of actually driving in competition and a high performance atmosphere. And I think to a certain extent that's attracting people to motorsport in general. And I'm seeing it from the very base grassroots level participation. I've got a son that's in competitive go-karting, and the numbers of growth that we're seeing on that side to business people that have performance cars doing those track day events that I referred to, all the way up to IndyCar that like saying absolutely tremendous growth and viewership, attendance numbers, things of that nature. So overall, I'm optimistic. I guess I'm not really providing any insights as to how I see racing evolving in any ways, but yeah, maybe that's one that could expand more on.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. I think if you go way back, kind of to the 90s and before open wheel racing, IndyCar specifically was pretty massive. Things started to shift and for a number of reasons. There was a split of series, also government regulation. For a long time, there was a lot of tobacco money and advertising that funded racing all over the world, whether it was IndyCar, Formula One, NASCAR, drag racing. When that went away, I think it challenged everything. Racing has always been a proving ground for technology. And as Ryan was mentioning, with electrification and hybrid, I think it's kind of reinvigorated motorsports to really be at the forefront of developing and innovating and perfecting those technologies to improve them for production vehicles and everyday drivers. So I think that's brought a new level of relevancy to the sport because for a while, what we were competing with had drifted pretty far from what people were driving. But, speaking specifically to IndyCar, I think there had been a period of struggle for relevancy, some of which wasn't isolated to IndyCar, but as the media landscape has changed, going away from cable to streaming and just the amount of access consumers have to any form of entertainment, there was so much more content available that it really put a challenge on everybody in sport, with the exception of the NFL. I think everyone was struggling at some level from a commercial standpoint, and IndyCar is in a really good spot right now. As Ryan mentioned, we've got a great TV partner in Fox that our new TV contract, we're in year 2 of it, but even compared to the first year of being exclusively on Fox, we're up 44% viewership. At venue attendance is high and setting records almost everywhere we go. Merchandise sales are setting records everywhere we go right now. So we're definitely in a window of opportunity and growth. So there's a massive effort from the teams and IndyCar as a whole and Fox to continue capitalizing on that momentum that we're feeling. And, right now, especially in May, heading towards Indy 500, which is our flagship event, it's an exciting time to be a part of it.
It is. And I love that perspective about how you're improving the technology for the everyday drivers. And for the kids that want to get into racing or involved in the industry at some point, what advice would you give them, or what advice would you even give your younger selves as you get started in this path?
I mean, I think that's an interesting one. I probably most often get asked about the path to becoming a driver, which, that's the hardest thing, the hardest point of entry in racing. And it's really no different than any other sport, for any kid that wants to play in the NBA or NFL or major leagues or IndyCar. It's the percentages of people that get started versus the numbers that actually make it to the highest levels is super small. But if you have a passion for motorsports, I think that's where it gets really interesting because there's a role really at any level. We cover every sector that you can think of, whether, we have full-time doctors that are involved in our sport, salespeople, accountants, finance, all the way down to kind of trade jobs. I view in a lot of ways, our mechanics and people that work on the car and build them. It's a similar but different path to being a plumber or electrician. So there's really no interest that you couldn't direct towards motorsports, from truck drivers to mechanics to engineers to business roles. So if you have a passion for racing, even if you're not a strong enough driver to make it at that level, there's so many other ways to get involved and capitalize on that passion.
Would you recommend trying the driving route first if that's what you're trying, and then hope you land, among the stars?
I mean, yeah, if that's what you want to do, certainly, I never dissuade anyone from chasing their passion. I will say that you can probably have a lot more job stability and less uncertainty in other roles. We've got 15 engineers on our team and 3 drivers, so there's definitely other roles that would offer less resistance to making it to the highest levels. But I wouldn't discourage anybody from trying any avenue, including driving.
Yeah. And Ryan, I saw you laugh at stability. Did that bring some flashbacks to racing on your end?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, especially at the professional level, yeah, we'll just kind of echo Ed's comments. And I guess maybe I'll be a little bit more direct, but I think in the driver market, it's really cutthroat. There's always a new generation of talent coming in, and to remain relevant, employed by top teams as a driver's an incredible challenge. And as Ed said, I mean, there's just so many opportunities across all of motorsports. So the science and math folks can certainly find roles within engineering or accounting, or so many marketing roles. That old saying, if you do something you love, you never work a day in your life. And I very much believe that even for someone who's in accounting, if they've got a passion for motorsports, they're working for ECR to manage their books, that's more exciting to them. It's easier to see the connection with their passion of working for ECR as opposed to finance company, as an example. So I think you don't always have to do something that directly touches the vehicles and the performance to be able to live that passion that folks have.
Mm-hmm. And as Ed mentioned, the Indy 500 is fast approaching. What are you both looking forward to the most, and what should fans keep an eye out for?
I mean, for me, getting behind the wheel, it's the one race that I still compete in. This will be my 23rd attempt. Finished second in the race before. Have led a lot of laps there, but have yet to win the race. So that's really my main motivator in my professional life. So just excited to get another opportunity to go chase that. And beyond that, it's a hard event to put into words how amazing it is. I encourage anyone that has never been to come check it out, even if you don't think you're a racing fan. It's the largest single-day sporting event in the world. There's nothing like it. So if you haven't been, come check it out.
Ryan, what are you looking forward to that day?
As Ed said, it's the biggest racing event in the world. I'm terrible at remembering numbers like this, but I feel like Ed can correct me if I'm wrong. It's something in the neighborhood of 350 to 400,000 attendance typically. Is that about right?
You're right there. They don't ever disclose what the actual numbers are, but from what I'm hearing, it's trending towards a sellout. So
it's just, yeah, I mean, it's just such an amazing event. To Ed's point, I think a non-motorsports fan without the history and the direct passion in it, it's hard to go to that type of environment and not at least get it to a certain extent and understand and appreciate just the scope of it, the passion, the energy, so on and so forth. So all of that's exciting. I got to go back to Ed though. As a driver, again, at a much, much lower level, I know when I haven't raced for 3 months and I'm participating in an event, it's challenging just to get back up to speed and put everything together. For you driving one event a year, what strategies, what challenges do you have doing this one event?
I've done this a long time. I was in the car a week and a half ago. We had a full field open test at the Speedway, and that had been the longest period of time that I hadn't been in the race car. I hadn't been in the IndyCar since the checkered flag fell at the 2025 Indy 500. So there's always some anxiety of getting back in, of how quickly you're going to get up to speed, how your feeling's going to be. But it's, it feels like going home in a way. I think I've done it long enough and am still qualified enough that the feelings all come back really quick. Don't want to say it's like riding a bike, but in some ways it is. It's very natural to me. I've been competing in this race for half my life. So that experience makes it a lot easier. If you didn't have the experience and had the duration of layoff that I'd had, I think it would make it a lot more challenging. But that was probably the thing that made me the most happy after that last test, was how good that I did feel in the car. Gave me a lot of confidence heading into the month of May.
Is there any physical training you have to do, or do you think it's more on the mental side now that you're just getting back to the mindset?
My training hasn't really changed from when I was full-time to being part-time. So, I'm fit to be in the car. There's still no matter how in shape you are, when you've been out of the car, even if it's just a month, the first time you get back in, you kind of have to wake all those muscles up. As hard as we train, you can't fully replicate the forces that you feel in the car. So you kind of got to give yourself a couple days to get all of those specific muscles woke back up. But yeah, the training is a year-round venture. It's something I do every day, even though I'm only competing in one race. And the mental side, that's a little easier. You can take mental reps, each and every day. So I kind of mentally put myself in the car all the time. And even when we're at other races and I'm just there supporting our drivers, when I'm listening to them talk about what they're experiencing, I can still put myself in the car with them just from all the experience I had, especially at racetracks that I competed at. It's a little harder when we go to races that I didn't drive in or new venues. It's a little harder to feel what they're feeling without having that firsthand experience. But, I get plenty of mental reps.
Yeah, visualization's a powerful tool.
It is.
And Ryan, I wanted to go back on something you touched on where you said even if you're not a fan of racing, you'll still feel something if you come out to a race. Have you seen more fans come in since Formula One had their documentary during COVID on Netflix? Has that sort of cross-pollinated into the different areas of racing?
Yeah, I mean, I think there has definitely been a big impact of that series. So it was very effective in getting people to understand the passion, the drive of the teams, of the drivers, and really kind of putting that personal story behind it. I do feel like to a certain extent, a lot of it was dramatized to make a fun and engaging show to watch. But what the end result is, it's put a lot more eyeballs on motorsports, and especially in the US market, you see improvements in attendance numbers of F1 events in the US, but we're seeing it across the board with I touched on IndyCar and IMSA both seeing just an incredible growth in numbers. So I think it's cast a bigger spotlight on motorsports overall, and there are many different series that are really seeing the direct benefits of that.
Yeah,
especially.
I would agree. I think the Drive to Survive series reintroduced or introduced a more casual sports fan to racing that we've been able to capitalize on, just given the nature that we're a domestic-based series and race coast to coast. So we're definitely able to benefit from that and really capitalize on it. I think that's back to one of your original questions of kind of the similarities or differences. I think a big difference between IndyCar and F1 is the accessibility that you can get at an IndyCar track. So I think if someone got interested in F1 and maybe went to the Grand Prix of Miami that they were just at last weekend and said, oh, I want to go check out something else and come to one of our events, it's a very similar type of racing, but it's a totally different experience with the level of access. IndyCar, whether it's doing autograph sessions at every event we go to, you can really get up close and personal with the cars and drivers, where it's much harder and much more expensive to do that at a Formula One race. But I just view that as an opportunity for us and the growth that they've experienced. And even within that, they've had a movie, and it seems like in a lot of ways they're still bigger than us, which they are from an international scope, but it's harder to totally compare ourselves to them now that they're exclusively on Apple TV here and streamed, and we don't get their TV numbers any longer. But even last year when they were on ESPN exclusively here, for as big as they seem at times, their TV numbers are still smaller than ours in this country, which is really what I focus on because we are a domestic series and the majority of our partners are domestically based as well. But it has definitely helped us.
I love your point about having more access here in the States and how that can just inspire the next generation because you're just able to get closer to the cars and the people and just the people in general in the industry. My final question is for Ed. You've had such an illustrious career. It's still going. You're still racing. What sort of legacy are you hoping to leave on this sport?
That's one I don't think about a ton. I more worry about that side of things just as it directly relates to my family and my kids and providing for them and setting an example for them on what hard work and dedication looks like and how they can translate that into whatever field or direction that they take their lives. I've got 3 kids. My oldest is graduating high school this month. She's planning on getting into law, which, is cool and unique. And we all are athletes and competitors at some level. So I think she'll probably try to direct that towards sport. But that's really what I think about from legacy as far as what fans or competitors, think about my career. I don't really worry about as much, more so just chasing my own dreams and goals and trying to do it the right way and hopefully setting my kids up for success with whatever they chase.
Thank you. I like that. Ed, Ryan, thank you so much for joining today. Really appreciated your insights and can't wait to see the Indy 500 in a few days.
Yeah, tune in, Fox.
Thanks, Kelly.